They found me on that bathroom floor, bleeding and broken. My husband's ring left a scar I still carry, but what he didn't know, that broken woman would rise up, build an empire, and make him crawl back on his knees. This is how I turned his worst mistake into my greatest victory. Before we dive into this journey, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't believe how this story ends. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever had to rebuild yourself from rock bottom? Let's get into it. My name is Simone Clark, and 3 years ago I was living what everyone thought was a fairy tale. Manhattan penthouse, designer clothes, a husband worth over $800 million. Trevor Blackwell, that was his name. Real estate mogul, always in the society pages, always smiling in those photos with his arm around my waist. Everyone called us the perfect power couple. A successful black woman and her billionaire husband, living the dream in New York City. But nobody knew what happened when those cameras stopped flashing. Nobody saw the man who checked my phone every night. Nobody heard him tell me that my clothes were too tight, my laugh too loud, my friends too ghetto. I was 28 years old, a marketing director before I met him, and slowly, piece by piece, he took that confident woman and shrank her down until I didn't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. It started small, the way these things always do. A comment about my makeup, a question about where I'd been. Then it was choosing my outfits for events, telling me which friends I could see, tracking my location on his phone. I told myself it was because he loved me, because he was protective. That's what I told myself when I stopped going to brunch with my girls. That's what I told myself when I quit my job because he said his wife didn't need to work. I was living in a golden cage and I didn't even realize I'd locked myself inside. The real problem started when his business began to fall apart. Trevor had this massive deal in the works, some luxury development in Miami that was supposed to be his crown jewel, but things kept going wrong. Investors pulling out, permits getting denied, construction delays. Every setback made him darker, meaner. He'd come home and the whole penthouse would fill with this tension, this electricity that made my skin crawl. I learned to be small, to be quiet, to stay out of his way. Then I found out I was pregnant. 3 months into carrying his child, and I thought maybe this would change things. Maybe a baby would remind him of who we used to be, back when he used to bring me flowers and tell me I was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I was so naive, so incredibly, dangerously naive. I told him at a business dinner. We were at this restaurant in Tribeca, all his investor friends around the table, and I thought the news would make him happy, proud even. I whispered it to him between courses, my hand on his arm, smiling. The look on his face made my blood run cold. He excused us from the table, his hand gripping my elbow so tight I knew I'd have bruises. In the restaurant bathroom, he told me I was trying to trap him, trying to ruin his life when everything was already falling apart. That was the first time he put his hands on me. He shoved me into the marble countertop and I felt something crack in my chest. Not my ribs, not yet. Something deeper, something in my soul that said this man doesn't love you anymore. Maybe he never did. I covered the bruise on my hip with concealer for 2 weeks. I practiced smiling in the mirror. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that he was stressed, that he didn't mean it. 2 weeks later, I suggested couples therapy. That's all I said. We were having breakfast and I mentioned maybe we could talk to someone, work through the stress together. That same day, his Miami deal fell through completely. $500 million gone, investors threatening lawsuits, his name getting dragged through the business press. And that night, he came home drunk. I knew the moment I heard the front door slam. I was in our bedroom, and every instinct in my body told me to run, to hide, to get out. But where was I going to go? This was my home. This was my husband. I was pregnant with his child, so I stayed. God help me, I stayed. He found me in the bathroom. I was brushing my teeth trying to pretend everything was normal, and he just started yelling about the deal, about the money, about how I never supported him, about how I was just another woman trying to bleed him dry. I tried to calm him down, and that's when he snapped. His fist caught my jaw first, then my ribs. I remember falling, hitting my head on the bathtub. I remember the taste of blood in my mouth. I remember thinking about my baby, my precious baby, and trying to curl my body around my stomach to protect what mattered most. I don't remember much after that. The neighbors heard me screaming. Someone called 911. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital bed with my sister Nicole holding my hand and crying. Broken ribs, severe concussion, internal bleeding, and no heartbeat on the ultrasound. My baby was gone. Trevor's rage had killed our child, and it had almost killed me too. The hospital social worker came to talk to me, the police wanted a statement, and Trevor's lawyers were already downstairs, controlling the narrative, telling everyone I'd fallen during an argument. Nicole told me he'd already done 3 interviews, playing the concerned husband, talking about my history of clumsiness. History of clumsiness. Like I'd tripped and beaten myself half to death. Nicole had flown in from Chicago the moment she heard. We hadn't been close for years. Trevor had made sure of that. Always had some excuse why we couldn't visit, why she couldn't come to New York. But she came anyway, and she brought something with her. A folder. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal documents, NDAS, evidence of other women. 3 of them, all with stories like mine. All paid off to stay quiet, all too scared to speak up. Nicole had been collecting this information for 2 years, waiting for the moment when I'd be ready to see the truth. I had a choice to make in that hospital bed. I could stay, try to make it work, live in that penthouse with a man who'd almost killed me. I'd have money, status, security. Or I could leave with nothing but my life and start over from scratch. Some people might think that's an easy choice, but when you've been broken down for 3 years, when you've lost yourself piece by piece, walking away from everything you know feels impossible. It took me 3 days to decide, 3 days of staring at the ceiling, touching my empty stomach, feeling the bandages on my ribs. And then I chose life. Nicole snuck me out of that hospital like we were in some kind of spy movie. Baseball cap, sunglasses, baggy clothes to hide the bandages. We took a taxi to Penn Station and caught a train to Chicago. I left behind the penthouse, the clothes, the jewelry, everything. I had $847 in my personal checking account. That's what 3 years of marriage to a billionaire left me with. $847 and a body that screamed in pain every time I breathed. Those first 6 months in Chicago were the darkest of my life. I slept on Nicole's couch in her tiny 1-bedroom apartment. Physical therapy 3 times a week to rebuild my core strength. Therapy twice a week to deal with the nightmares, the PTSD, the depression that made me want to stay in bed all day. Some mornings I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror because I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Where was the Simone who used to plan celebrity weddings? Where was the woman who could walk into a room and command attention? Trevor had taken her, and I didn't know if she'd ever come back. But slowly, so slowly, I started to remember who I used to be. Before Trevor, I'd been an event planner. Not just any event planner, I'd done galas for musicians, weddings for athletes, launch parties that made the gossip columns. I was good at it. Really good. And one day, Nicole's friend mentioned she was getting married and couldn't afford the planner she wanted. Something sparked in me, something I thought Trevor had killed. I told her I'd do it for free, just to see if I still had the magic. That wedding was my resurrection. I poured everything into it, all my pain, all my hope, all the creativity that had been locked away for 3 years. It was beautiful, elegant. People cried during the ceremony, danced until midnight, and left talking about how it was the most incredible wedding they'd ever attended. And they asked who planned it. Nicole's friend gave them my name. Within a week, I had 3 more clients. Within a month, I had 10. I called my company Clark Elite Events, started it from Nicole's living room with a borrowed laptop and a dream. My first major client was a man named George Hamilton, CEO of Hamilton Tech Industries. He needed someone to plan his company's 25th anniversary gala, and somehow my name ended up on his desk. I'll never forget that first meeting. I walked into his office still moving a little carefully because my ribs weren't fully healed, and I pitched him an event that would celebrate his company's past while looking toward the future. He didn't just hire me, he believed in me. That gala made the cover of Forbes, the Chicago Tribune did a full spread, and suddenly, Simone Clark was back. George became more than a client. He became a friend, then a mentor, then something I wasn't ready to name. He was different from Trevor in every way that mattered. 15 years older than me, a widower who'd lost his wife to cancer 5 years earlier. Humble. Kind. He never raised his voice. He never made me feel small. He asked my opinion and actually listened. He respected my boundaries. And when I told him my story one night over dinner, he cried. This billionaire CEO sat across from me with tears in his eyes and told me he was sorry I'd gone through that and he'd spend every day proving that not all men were monsters. We took it slow, so slow. 2 years of friendship and partnership before we even kissed. He invested in my business, not to control it, but to help it grow. Clark Elite Events expanded from Chicago to New York, Los Angeles, Miami. Within 3 years, my company was worth $15 million. I had employees, office space, clients calling from around the world, and I had George, who asked me to marry him on a beach in Barbados with the sunset turning everything gold. That's when Trevor came back into my life. His empire had crumbled without me. Turns out, a lot of his social connections had been through my network, my relationships, my charm at those dinner parties. His reputation was destroyed by whispers and rumors about what really happened that night. Investors wouldn't touch him. His net worth had dropped to almost nothing, and then he saw my face in a business magazine, saw the announcement of my engagement to George Hamilton, did the math on George's net worth, $2 billion, and realized he'd thrown away the best thing he ever had. He showed up at my office in Chicago on a random Tuesday. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed past her and burst into my office like he had any right to be there. I looked up from my desk, and for just a second, I was back in that bathroom, feeling his fists, tasting blood. But then I remembered who I was now. I pressed the button for security and told him he had 60 seconds before he was escorted out. He tried to apologize, said he'd changed, that he'd been in therapy, that he understood what he'd done wrong. Asked me to remember the good times, like the good times could erase my broken ribs and my dead baby. I didn't say a word. I just watched security take him by the arms and walk him out while he kept talking, kept pleading. I went back to my work like he'd never been there at all. But Trevor wasn't done. He showed up at my engagement party, this massive society event at the Four Seasons, everyone who was anyone in Chicago there to celebrate. George had spared no expense, and I'd planned every detail myself. I was wearing white, my engagement ring catching the light, surrounded by people who loved me. And Trevor crashed through those doors like a tornado, yelling about how I'd stolen his life, how George had stolen his wife, how none of this was fair. I could have stayed quiet, could have let security handle it again. But something in me snapped. I walked right up to him in front of 300 people, and I told my truth. Told them about the abuse, the hospital, the baby I'd lost. Told them about the other women he'd paid to stay silent. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I looked him in the eye and said, "You did this to yourself. You had a queen and treated her like trash. Now you're standing in that trash alone." The room was silent. Someone was recording on their phone. By the next morning, the video had 2 million views. Other women started coming forward with their stories. Brands that still worked with Trevor dropped him immediately. His last remaining business ventures evaporated. Within 6 months, he'd filed for bankruptcy. The last time I saw Trevor, it was raining. George and I were living in this beautiful brownstone in Chicago, and I was 5 months pregnant with our daughter. There was a knock at the door late one night, and when I opened it, there he was, soaking wet, looking 20 years older than the last time I'd seen him. He fell to his knees right there on my porch and begged me to take him back, to help him rebuild, to give him another chance. He said he had nothing left, that he needed me, that he'd always loved me. I looked down at this man who'd once made me feel so small, who'd put me in a hospital, who'd killed our child with his rage. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pity. Just nothing. I put my hand on my belly, felt my daughter kick, and I said, I forgive you, Trevor. Not for you, but for me. So I can move forward without carrying you with me. But you'll never be part of my life again. You need to find your own way to heal, your own path to redemption. That path doesn't include me. I closed the door and went back inside to my husband, my real husband, who was cooking dinner and asking our daughter to stop kicking Mommy so hard. I never saw Trevor again. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he moved to some small town, got a regular job, started going to therapy for real. I hope he found peace. I really do. But his peace wasn't my responsibility anymore. George and I got married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony with just family and close friends. Nicole was my maid of honor. I was glowing, 8 months pregnant, happier than I'd ever imagined possible. Clark Elite Events is now valued at $50 million. I launched a foundation that helps domestic violence survivors rebuild their lives and start businesses. I've helped 37 women so far, and every single one of them reminds me why I survived, why I fought back, why I chose life. I still have scars, physical ones from that night, and deeper ones that therapy helps me manage. Some nights I still wake up from nightmares, but when I do, George is there, holding me, reminding me that I'm safe. My daughter is 3 now, and she's fierce and brilliant and everything I wish I'd been when I first met Trevor. I'm teaching her that her voice matters, that her boundaries matter, that no amount of money or status is worth sacrificing herself. People ask me sometimes if I ever think about what my life would have been like if I'd stayed, if I'd just accepted the abuse, kept quiet, lived in that penthouse playing the perfect wife, and the answer is no. I don't think about it because that woman died on that bathroom floor. The woman who rose up from that blood and pain and started over with $800, she's someone completely different, someone stronger, someone who knows her worth can't be measured in net worth or penthouses or diamond rings. Trevor thought breaking me would keep me down. Instead, he freed me to become who I was always meant to be. Sometimes God removes people from your life because He's about to bless you beyond your imagination. Trevor was my test, and George was my testimony. This life I'm living now, my business, my husband, my daughter, my purpose, this is what happened when I chose myself, when I decided my life was worth more than His love. If you're in a situation like I was, please hear me. It's not love. I don't care how much money he has, how charming he is in public, how much he apologizes afterward. Love doesn't leave bruises. Love doesn't make you small. Love doesn't put you in the hospital. And you deserve better. You deserve everything. Don't wait until you're on a bathroom floor to realize it. Choose yourself today. Choose life today. Because your greatest chapter might be waiting on the other side of your courage. If this story moved you, do me a favor, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories of resilience and triumph. And remember, your darkest moment might be the door to your greatest chapter. Drop a comment and tell me what part of my journey hit you hardest. I'll see you in the next one. Stay blessed.